Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. Welcome back if you've watched my content before. It's been a while since I made a video, and one of the last videos I made was about Lewis. And now looking back on it, I decided that I don't like it very much, and I'm redoing it. So yeah, as well as showing off some improvements and updates on the puppet itself. So as most of you can see, this is a dragon puppet, and it's hand and arm operated, as you can see. And I use my hand to open his mouth and close, and use my arm to give the head and neck and body some movement. Still getting used to this camera. But yeah, the rest of his body is kind of like a plushie toy. And I'll tell you soon about how I made him and what materials I used. I do markets at my local farmers market, kind of community market, at a mountain near my house. It's a really nice community up there, and I just started because I've been going to those markets since I was a little kid. And yeah, so anyway, it was my first time doing market there, and it was the first time I was really showing off my sculptures and all of my artwork. For those who don't know, I have done smaller sculptures for quite a while before I started doing the bigger puppets like these. And anyway, on the day, someone approached me and they had worked on film productions, which included but were not limited to Star Wars and the new Dark Crystal TV show, which was crazy to me. I was like so amazed to run into someone who had been working on those projects. So that was really cool. And it inspired me a lot to make something that would really impress and showcase the extent of my capability and what I could make, like how big and impressive and everything that I could do, because I knew I was kind of capable of doing something more than what I'd been doing at the time. And I think seeing someone like that really pushed me to uh, like not so much do better, but to prove my to myself my own capabilities. So aside from that, I've always been inspired by magic and mythology and fantasy themes in films and books since I was a really small child. So making art of dragons came really naturally to me. It was something that I always just wanted to do, and I was enjoying so much as a young kid. As a young teen, I was obsessed with the inheritance cycle, which some of you may know as Aragon. The Aragon books were really popular when I was a kid, and they're written by Christopher Paolini. I drew dragons from those books a lot, which, yeah, like the whole book series was a real big inspiration for me. So as far as other inspiration goes, visually for my interpretation of dragons, I like to mash up a bunch of different features from a variety of animals. I really like to give my dragons long faces that are similar in structure to like borzoi dogs, wolfhounds, things like that, horses and crocodiles. And with some dragons, I like to give them more of a mammal-like marsupial look. A lot of people have told me he looks like either like a platypus or a crocodile, and I can kind of see that. But yeah. Yeah, while I have that marsupial inspiration, there's also like a very reptilian and dinosaur-like look to him, and that I like to keep with all my dragons. You know, there's like a multi inspirational mixing pot of ideas and structures from other animals that I like to use. So how I made him. So the process of making the bulk of him took a few months, but I've been working on him on and off for about 3 years. He's remained a prototype, and I'm very sure that I will never sell him. This puppet was made to fit my hand and my arm dimensions, so the internal mechanics are quite delicate and messy because he was the first one I've made. Um, so for newer ones, there'll definitely be improvements for the insides and the mechanical structure of it that's underneath all of the clay. Yeah. So any new puppets that I make will most likely follow a more neater, sturdier, and more spacious design for the inner workings. I began making him and the structure of him out of aluminium foil and wire. The foil was used to create the majority of the mass of the head, so that I didn't use up and waste too much of the clay. Um, I did make the head separate from the body, and once I had fully designed the shape and built the mass, I went over it with clay. His eyes, though, are large gemstone beads. They're blue goldstone, I believe, and they sparkle really, really nicely. They're very glittery. I don't know whether you could be able to tell from this webcam footage or not, but they're super sparkly. They're so cute. But yeah, they're gemstones. And I just had them laying around, so I decided to use them for him. But yeah, so I made both the hinges on his head separately. So the bottom jaw was made completely separate from the top jaw. And I made like a hinge with the wire so that they're both connected and are able to move independently from one another. So I inlaid the bead eyes in the clay layer and baked them in the oven at a low heat of 130 degrees Celsius for about 20 minutes. That's usually how I bake all my clay. Especially with this thickness, it's not very thick. It's quite a thin layer of clay on top of the aluminium foil and the wire. Yeah, the rest of his body has a thin skeleton of wire through it to keep it somewhat posable. So his tail, for instance, is kind of like you can bend it and it'll kind of stay like that. Not really, because gravity, but the wire isn't super strong, but it does make it so that he will stay in some kind of shape and not just flop around. And he's stuffed with a fluffy wadding and covered in fur fabric that was hand sewn on. So as you can see, his little hands here, the little hands were made by wrapping strips of cotton around shaped wire and painting them with acrylic paint. The fur is actually from a recycled cotton vest that I had, and I sprayed it with purple spray paint. The method I used was spraying the fur and dunking it in a bucket of water to make the color seep a little bit and run, while also making parts of the fur kind of stiff, kind of scale-like to the touch, you know? I do have, I made TikToks actually along the time that I was making him, so I have some kind of process shots and process videos of making him that I could probably put up on screen. But the addition that I have made to Lewis is the wings. I gave him wings. I gave him some wings recently. So I'll stand up a bit to show you what I mean. So I sewed these on afterwards, so I don't know whether you can see how they've gone on, but I just really just sewed them onto the seam between his belly and the top of him, which has the fur on it. And these wings are posable to an extent, so I can actually fold them up like that, and they kind of fold, and then you can have them splayed out. And they're all extended. They're very bat-like, and they're very cool, and they just kind of add that little extra to him that he really needed in order to look more like a dragon, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think it really makes a difference to the way he looks, and it's great. I made these with wire, so it's quite a thick wire that I used on the inside of this, and I doubled it up, so I actually wrapped the wire around itself to make it thicker, and then I made all of the spines of the wings, and then I basically just cut fabric out to the shape that I wanted and sewed it onto the wire, and then used a lot of hot glue and a lot of paint to really bind it all together and give it the effect I wanted. I used a lot of methods with like painting the spots on and things like that. Yeah, all in all, it turned out quite good, and the effect I'm quite happy with. His little tail as well is made with clay, the little, spur prong thingy. And yeah, so that's him updated, really. He's quite a good, he's quite a good puppet, quite posable, quite expressive, like even regardless of the fact that he has no eyelids or anything like that. Like, he can do a lot of things. A lot of the children like him a lot at the markets that I go to. They're either terrified of him or they think he's really great. And I usually get them to go up to him and pat his nose because I think that's really cute. They're always scared that he's going to bite them or something, and I have to keep reminding them that he has no teeth. No teeth at all. He does have a little tongue, though. The little tongue was made out of some fabric. But yeah, I love how he can do this little thing where he shakes his head. Like that. And yeah, I gave him some little earrings too. Well, earrings. I mean, he has got some on his ears, but the ones from his horns I think are the cutest. There's just little rose quartz, and I wire wrapped a couple of those on there. But yeah, I've been sculpting things since I was very, very young. I kind of tell the story a lot, so I feel like it gets a bit old. But when I was a really little kid, I used to dig mud out of the garden at the place that we lived at, and I used to sculpt with the clay mud. And eventually, my mum was looking at me and she was like, I'm just going to get you some proper clay, child. Get you some proper clay. So she got me some Fimo, and Fimo, for those who don't know, is kind of like it's a polymer clay. So it's like Sculpey for those who know about Sculpey. And what it is, it's a clay, and it's got a tougher consistency than plasticine. And you bake it in the oven, and once it is baked, it becomes really hard, like plastic. So if I touch him, you'll see just how tough he is. He's pretty sturdy. It'd be quite hard to break one of these. Obviously, you could. Don't recommend being super rough with them, but they're very sturdy, which is great because it means that you can make a lot of stuff out of them and not worry about it being too fragile. But anyway, yeah. So I learned sculpting from a very young age. I would have been about 8 years old when I was digging the clay out of the garden to make stuff, and I actually ended up launching an Etsy store when I was really little with the help of my mum. And I made little sculptures for that up until I was about, what age would I have been? Maybe about 16 or 17. And that's when I started to go into proper business kind of courses to start my own business and run it more independently and run it more seriously too. And that's where I started launching my sculpture business into a more professional business where I took commissions and all that kind of thing. But I've been doing this for a very long time, I think, is what I'm trying to say. And it's given me a long time to really hone my skill and hone all of my processes and, my skills. And I think a big inspiration that I had was going to a workshop. Because I'm going to say I am a self taught artist. I never went to art school or anything like that. But one thing I did do was go to a sculpture workshop on the Gold Coast, which was run by a sculptor called Richard Muick. And Richard Muick is actually a really profound person in the TV and film industry. He's well known for doing monster costumes and monster creature costumes and performance art. So if you've ever watched Alien versus Predator and things like that, he was one of those guys in the alien costumes. And not only did he wear them, he actually helped to make those costumes as well. So he was a really awesome guy. And it was super fun to go to his workshop and have a bit of direction and teaching from him. So the workshop I went to was particularly about making monsters and sculpting monsters. So that's where I went. And it was a fairly short workshop. I think it was an hour or two. And we were just sculpting things out of plasticine. But he gave us a lot of pointers and shared a lot of his knowledge with us. And that was really cool. I kind of remember that to this day being such a cool experience for me because I definitely got taught some things from him, but I was also kind of on the same page, as in I really understood everything he was talking about. And I got where he was coming from when he was talking about creatures and sculpting methods and form and structure and all those things that you kind of need to be aware of when you're doing sculpting. Like, is the internal structure strong enough to hold it up? Like, is it going to topple over? Is it going to be really structurally sound, Like with this puppet here, I've had to make him, like I've said, I've made him with a metal wire core so that he was structurally sound before I just went and made him out of clay. Because if I just made him out of clay, he wouldn't be this good. His structure wouldn't be there and he wouldn't be as sturdy and he wouldn't have all the internal workings that he needed. So it's things like that. You've got to be aware of all of the structure and the bases that you're creating. So yeah, anyway, Richard Muick was a great inspiration. And other than that, I did watch recently the Dark Crystal TV show. on Netflix. It was really good. I remember I watched the first episode and I was kind of put off by it because I'm a really big fan of the original film, The Dark Crystal. I forget which year it was done in, but it was made a long time ago. And I remember just the new one kind of rubbed me the wrong way when I first watched it, and I think that's just because I was so attached to the original. But I did give it another go, and I watched it again, and I ended up watching the series 2 times over because I loved it so much, and it just grew on me the more I watched it and the longer I watched it. The puppeteering in that show is so good, and it was such a big inspiration for me to actually finish Lewis because I hadn't finished him when I started watching the Dark Crystal TV show, and by the end of it, I actually had motivated myself enough to create his wings and finish him up and fix him and all those kinds of things. And it gave me just a new love for what I had been enjoying so much in the first place. It really reinvigorated my passion for it because I think for a long time doing the markets, um, it was a good thing and a bad thing, I think, for me to do the markets, because while I did get a lot of praise from people who enjoyed my creations, there were a lot of people who thought that they were just scary or ugly. And they would say that to my face too. They would come up to me and tell me, like, oh, that's really ugly, or that's really scary, or, you know, and I think there's with markets as well as an artist, it's better to do artisan fair art related markets because when you're doing just casual kind of country markets, people don't usually see the value in things that are handmade. They just are there to get something cheap because it's their day out and they just want to have a good old time, and that's completely fair enough. But it means that for a lot of things that I had, I was selling them for far lower than I thought I wanted to. And it just unfortunately made me feel like I wasn't getting anything back for the amount of effort I was putting into the things I was creating. And so over time, I did the markets for about 2 years, 2 or 3 years, and I think over time it really wore me out. And I just got completely burnt out in my creative endeavor to sculpt because I was just like, well, I'm not getting anything back from this really. Um, so why would I bother doing it? And even now till today, I don't really do sculpting as much, probably for those reasons. Also because I don't have any space to put my things. Um, but I have to say, the Dark Crystal show really did, at least, at the very least, motivate me enough to finish Lewis and to get him all done and get him looking how I think he needed to be. He needed to be finished. And I'm just so happy to be able to share him with you all. But yeah, if you have any questions about him at all, I'd love to hear them. Um, I would love to make more puppets like him at some point. But for now, I think I'm quite happy with him how he is, and I think he's not going to go through many more changes. I did fix his horns recently. They used to just be glued onto the fabric at the top, and recently I cut little holes in the fabric and glued them straight into the top of the head. Now they're a lot more sturdier and they don't wobble as much as they used to. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed making him, and I'd love to help out other people who are interested in making similar things, because I've seen a lot of people making dragon puppets similar to these ones, and it's so fascinating to see how all the other designs that people come up with, and especially the ones that blink and have the blinking eyes on them and everything like that. I think that's so cool. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little update video on Lewis, and I hope you like his wings. And yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Make sure to hit the subscribe button if you really like my content, as I'm going to be working on uploading more videos soon. Thank you again, and I'll see you in the next one.